is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 643. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, what's been going on over in the Rocky Mountains?
Oh, not much. I'm happy to hear that we're on episode 643 of 700, so that's pretty sweet. And
oh, God.
I just got all my travel stuff figured out for a trip to the Bahamas next week for work, actually, related to Brawl, which means that you'll be getting a special guest next week, all of you lucky listeners, to get a break.
Yeah, get a break. You beat me to the punch on that one.
I got out ahead of it.
so what are you going to, you just sort of slip that in there, something for Brawl for work. Like, I don't think we've really talked about it on the show. What's going on with that?
Well, I mean, it actually has to do with our sponsor, FTX. They acquired Good Luck Games. That's our studio that makes Storybook Brawl. So I'm going to get to meet a bunch of those folks in person and bounce ideas and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, cool. Congrats. That's really awesome. And I know that you've been doing a fair bit of, when you've been streaming lately, Storybook Brawl's been a part of the component. So people can check that out if they haven't played or seen Storybook Brawl yet. It's an auto battler, right? So it's not quite as involved as Magic as far as, I don't know, strategically, I guess. Is that fair to say, Luis? I don't really know. How do you describe an auto battler?
So an auto battler, I think the best way to Magic players is you draft the deck and then the computer plays it. The actual gameplay is random attacks, but the skill-based part is drafting and positioning, the decisions you make there, which the winningest Brawl players actually win a little more than the winningest Magic players, which indicates that there might be higher, at least a comparable skill cap. I don't want to say higher, but it is definitely a game which, I'm not the best player at Brawl, for example. There's a bunch of folks who are much better than I am, and I think that's a cool aspect that, as a game developer, you never want to be the best player at your game because that does not bode well for the number of folks playing your games.
Yeah, that's cool. It might be something that our audience could be interested in as kind of an alternate way to experience something draft-like, right?
I was just thinking I don't know when the last time the best Magic player was someone who worked at Wizards, but maybe when Turian joined, actually. He was, I think, one of the picks for the best. Turian was a master.
Yeah, but now he's probably awful because he's been in the building for years, and it just saps all the skill out of it.
I've seen Gian draft. Yeah,
My theory is that they've buried some type of Magic player kryptonite below the building, and just every day you go in, you lose a little bit. Anyway, we've got our Q&A episode this week. We love doing this episode of the show. This is where our patrons get to send in their questions. A wide range of topics usually are hit. Interestingly, I haven't had the chance to go over the questions yet. Normally I bring them into the sheet, but I haven't. So we might get some curveballs here. We're just going to go down the line on those ones. And we always look forward to these shows. Before we get into the questions and the answers, let's talk about our sponsors, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for really anything you need. If you want to pick up some Magic cards, we had a huge announcement. Luis, do we want to talk about the OP announcement before we get into the questions? I don't know if you want to touch on that or not.
Oh, I would love to.
Okay.
I was actually gonna do it in the sign up, but you know what? Let's just tackle it at the top of the show after we do the sponsors.
Okay, cool.
Because it's a big deal for anyone who plays Magic.
Right. So the reason I bring it up with the CFB ad is because Paper Magic is going to be coming back in the form of the Pro Tour as well as local events and even a kind of in between tournament called the Regional Championship and a World Championship, by the way. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but you might need cards. Pioneer looks like it's being pushed modern, that kind of stuff. So if you need to pick up a deck, if you want to get fired up and ready for the next season, you can head over to channelfireball.com to pick up the cards you need for the deck. They have a CFB marketplace where you can buy cards from multiple different stores in one place under one cart, one checkout, and one website, which is really convenient because it gives you a bigger selection, but also it lets you kind of dial in on the prices, the conditions, the shipping speed, all of that kind of stuff that you'd like. So make sure you check out Channel Fireball for that. And if you want to get your skills polished off so that you can actually try to qualify for a regional championship and then a pro tour and then the world championship, well, if you want to do that, you're going to need to learn. And you're here to do that for the limited portion, which we will also talk about in a minute. But Constructed, of course, is a big part of competitive play as well. And if you want to get brushed up on all of that, CFB Pro is the place to go. That's premium content for you to learn and get better, get deck text, get deck guides, and really improve your skill level, both broadly, but also specific to certain formats. And you can find CFP Pro at channelfireball.com as well. If you do end up buying anything, if you use the affiliate code LR, I really thank you for doing so. It lets them know that we sent you over. The show's also brought to you by FTX. That's a place to manage all of your digital assets. If you're looking to dip your toe into that pool, if that type of technology interests you, if you think that it's going somewhere in the future and you want to get ahead of it, FTX is a great place to kind of dip your toe in the pool. Again, you're going to want to educate yourself about it, and FTX has some resources for that as well. But when you're ready, when you're feeling like, okay, I got a handle on what these things are, how it works, FTX is the exchange that you can go to buy and sell these type of assets. If you're within the United States, it's ftx.us, and outside is ftx.com. I will remind you that does constitute an investment, and anytime you're going to do any type of investing, there is a potential for risk, and you want to make sure that you consult a professional before doing so. Last but not least, the Patreon. Patreon.com/limited resources. This is kind of the lifeblood of the show, and we really want to say thank you to each and every person on the Patreon for supporting us. It really does mean the world to us, and if you've been with us for a while, extra special thanks. It means more than you know, and we really appreciate it. One of the cool things you get to do, by the way, is you get access to the Patreon feed, which is where we where we put up our posts for things like the question and answer show, which we're going to be doing. So all of our questions are coming from patrons here. And that's just one of the perks that you get for being on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Before we talk about the OP changes, let's do a crack pack. Got a real one here.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Still smells nice. You can't smell it though, can you? Sorry, buddy. Okay, so our first card out is Scoured Barrens. That's the black-white dual land. Next is Befriending the Moths, which I'm not a huge fan of, although I have lost to a fair bit. That one's going to be probably number 3 on the I don't really play it myself, but people kill me with it all the time list. Moonsnare Specialist. It's held up, done well. Kitsune Ace, not so much. Coinlane Stalker.
Specialist has been disappointing, though.
Well, I would say it's gone down since our original very high grade, but only a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just saying it looked like just a complete banger, and I think it's kind of resulted as like, yeah, this is solid, but not the. I agree. Not the best.
I thought it would be on the short list for best commons in the set, but it's not. Coinlane Stalker. I never played Coinlane Stalker.
Stalker's okay, but yeah, I'm not excited about it.
How about Bamboo Grove Archer? You wanted a 1 green 2-drop. That's the business.
Yeah, so some were skeptical about that during the set review, but it ended up being quite good.
Who was skeptical?
I don't want to name names.
Okay. Yeah, no, that card's great. I mean, look, if you want to slow things down and get the ramp game going, that's your guy. That thing is a stop sign. Saiba Trespassers, nobody plays it. Light the Way, nobody plays it. Undercity Scrounger. I play it more than most people, and it's still pretty bad. Moonfolk Puzzle Maker, there's a 1/4.
Yeah, the fine. Puzzle Maker has overperformed. The fact that it's the combination of like getting the scry in, a little flyer with decent stats, being an artifact, all that stuff adds up.
Yeah. Right now I'm still between Specialist and Bamboo Grove Archer, but our last comment is Experimental Synthesizer, a card I played a lot at the beginning of the format, but now I never see because I've kind of deprioritized red a bit. And, anybody who's in red wants as many of these as they can get, basically, so I never see them.
Yeah, I really like that card initially, and I've found it hard to end up with that card in my deck very often.
Right. That's a hard part. Uncommons. Roadside Reliquary. Another card that I don't play very much, but I'm real picky about when I play it. We played it in the deck that we drafted last week, and that's the kind of spot I want it, where we're really into that deck, not just hoping to like get a card back out of it or mize. I really don't like messing with my mana. We talk about it on the show all the time that you need to realize that a 9/8 mana base actually isn't very good, right? And so if you're going to compromise it with cards like Roadside Reliquary, there better be a heck of an upside on it.
Yeah, it can be quite rewarding, but I agree that it's not a card you can just take that early. And it's the kind of card that pays you off for being in black-white, like the deck we drafted last week, but not a card that you should start out like, how do I make this work?
I got to 6 wins with it, by the way. Couldn't quite get that 7th. Patchwork Automaton is next.
I do like this one.
Yeah, this card's scary. This is the 2-mana 1/1 with Ward 2, and whenever you cast an artifact, it picks up a +1/+1 counter.
Yeah,
I wouldn't take it here, but
no, I'm lower in artifact decks than I used to be.
Right, me too.
I tend to draft more of the good stuff style decks these days, or ninjas, but I think the Automaton is a pretty sweet card.
Now, what about this one? This one actually I would take here. I think it's Generous Visitor. This is the green 1/1, and whenever you cast an enchantment, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That is a very powerful 1-drop.
Yeah, Generous Visitor is great. I actually played with it a decent amount, testing for the set championship because it was part of the Naya Runes deck. I like it. Good high upside pick, and I like the enchantment deck. Starting with a 1-drop is always pretty nice. So yeah, seems pretty reasonable to me.
This is a really sweet one to get for our rare slot because it's a great head-to-head with Generous Visitor. It's Kami of Transience. They're so similar. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2 trample, but whenever you cast an enchantment, it gets a counter. So you can't move them around, and it costs an extra mana, but it has trample. And at the beginning of each end step, if an enchantment was put into your graveyard from the battlefield this turn, you can return Kami of Transience from your graveyard to your hand. So it has the ability to come back later as well, which of course I think puts it over the top of Generous Visitor. But it is interesting how similar the two cards are.
Yeah, no, I like the Kami of Transience. I would be in for taking that. But yeah, that is pretty funny that those are head to head. Kami of Transience is just all upside. Like you just take this card and it's just going to be fantastic for you, kind of no matter what's going on.
Yeah, because there's so many enchantments in green that you get spotted counters anyway. And if you're in green blue or green white, forget it. Like Kami of Transience, like a 5/5 trample for 2 that comes back at some point to be a 3/3 trample. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about OP real quick here. We are going to talk about this with our guests next week as well, so we can kind of give our initial thoughts on it, maybe go deeper next week. But the broad strokes for the organized play announcement for those of you that didn't see it or maybe just sort of skimmed over it, the broad strokes are that the Pro Tour is back, and there will be 3 of them next season. There also is a World Championship above them, and then below them is a new thing called a regional championship, which has a different size based on the region. There's something like 10 regions around the world. And so you'll have to check for the one that you live in to see where it goes. The US one is huge, very, very big. It has a big prize pool as well. So think of something above a GP, but below a Pro Tour before. It's somewhere in that range. Very interesting place to be there. And how do you get to that? Local game store level events, WPN locations, that type of stuff are going to be able to run tournaments that feed into the regional championship. The regional championship feeds into the Pro Tour, and the Pro Tour feeds into the World Championship. That's it. It's a much more visually seeable format or structure, I should say, than what we had before, where it was too difficult to explain if you could even understand it yourself. Now look, if you're at a local level, and you're like, hey, I want to try to make my way up to the Pro Tour and play in one of these things. You play in the local level, you play at the regional level, you play at the Pro Tour level, and then if you do really well there, you can make it all the way up to the top. The other big stuff to note are that GPs aren't part of this structure. It does seem like there's going to be some events that resemble GPs or maybe even are better than what we had, but they're not. There's no default mid-level tournament like that you could open mid-level tournament that you can go to and just play and qualify for the Pro Tour for a regional championship, at least as of now. So that's kind of interesting. Another big note is that the regional championships are being ran by tournament organizers, not by Wizards of the Coast. So like DreamHack got the one for US, for example. And so they're giving them a lot of agency. I watched the Q&A with Huey yesterday on the Wizard stream. And, a lot of his answers were, that's going to be up to the regional tournament organizer about like, hey, what's the structure going to be and how many can I qualify and all this. And they're just like, it seems like they're kind of like, here's the keys to that particular car. And those tournament organizers get to decide for themselves how they're going to run things, whatever's best for them. So that's another big part. And then the last thing, of course, for us is Limited. Limited is back. It will be one of the options that the regional tournament organizers can use to run the WPN events that qualify for the regional championships. So your local level, there will be some type of limited event that you can win and go play in a regional championship, which is awesome. Unclear about the regional championship themselves.
I don't think they're going to have limited.
I don't think so either, but it's not, it's up to them.
Well, and from the TO perspective, I can tell you it's up to you. You can run limited or constructed. Generally means we'll run constructed at these large scale events because the logistics are get pretty tough for large limited events.
For bringing in packs and stuff, or
yeah, just the cost too. Like if you look at Grand Prix were subsidized by Wizards.
Right.
They got to run limited. How often did Star City or DreamHack or any of these third party organizers, NRG, run limited? Not that often. Sometimes, but just not that often.
Okay. Yeah. So that's, I think, a reasonable expectation there, that there won't be limited at those, but the Pro Tours are going back to the same structure that they were before, where you play 3 rounds of, you draft and play 3 rounds of limited to start off the day. And then you play 5 rounds of constructed, and then you do that again the next day. So that's really exciting. Limited at the highest stage again. So those are the broad strokes on it, kind of the important hitters. What's your take on it, Luis? Your kind of initial impression?
I like it. I mean, a big part of what I wanted out of any organized play system was like tournaments that I would care about and get to participate in. And this does deliver that. Like the tournaments that they have on deck here look good to me. We get Pro Tours are now more exclusive than they used to be. That's one thing where it's actually like a little bit different, right? Where when you go it's harder now to qualify for a Pro Tour than it used to be. It used to be. I'm ignoring Rivals, MPL, all that. I'm basically let's take us back to the system we had before the MPL, right? 2018 or so, 2017. Mm-hmm. Under those systems, if you won a PTQ, you would go to the Pro Tour before they changed it to RPTQs, I guess. But under this system, you go to regionals, and then if you do
mean the regional championship?
Regional championship. Yeah, I'm going to call it regionals, though.
Oh, good luck with that.
Hey, don't look at me. I don't do coverage anymore. I can talk over.
Fair enough.
You're the one who has to.
I have some different constraints there.
Yeah. It's actually really good for you to practice saying it the right way, because that way you won't mess it up.
It really is, because I have been told in no uncertain terms that we do not call this regionals, because regionals was an old tournament that has a certain connotation that was much lower than the one that the regional championships afford. So it's like, I think they don't want to go near that,
All right. Well, I'll do what I can to help you. So you qualify for regionals, and then if you do well there, you get to play at the Pro Tour. And I like it. There's in-store play. There's international events. The Pro Tours are international, so you get to compete against the best in the world, not just the best in your region. I think that's one thing. The regional Pro Tours that one season cut short by COVID that had regional Pro Tours. Part of what I found less motivating just those is like, I want to play against the best players in the world, not just the best players in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it culminates in Worlds. I actually think Worlds being a bigger tournament is pretty cool too. I don't have an issue with that at all. Like I like it. And the biggest part is actually goes back to our regionals versus regional championship discussion. If the regional championships feel like tournaments that you are excited to play in and you accomplish something by qualifying for, which this system is set up to try and do, I believe this will be a successful system. Like, I think that's what it would take. Like, you go to regionals, the regional championships, and qualify, and you're like, wow, I did it. I got there. I'm really happy about this. If it ends up being that the regional championships feel like an RPTQ, I don't think the system is going to succeed. Or at least it won't be as exciting as it could have been.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to succeed at that part, at least. So I think it'll depend on what region you're in. Right, because each region gets a certain number of Pro Tour slots allocated to it, and also the prize pools change by region as well. So if we snapshot the biggest one, which is the US region, that one will certainly feel that way. That has $130,000 prize pool and $30,000 for first place. Like, if you win the US regional championship, I mean, you're coming up on a Pro Tour victory as far as size goes for you, right? Like, it was 40,000 for the winner when I first came in. It bumped up to 50, but you're getting 30, right? Like, it's no joke. 15 for second there as well. So, and those are going to be big-ish, I would assume. I don't know how many players. I don't think they've said, but I assume 500 something players, 600, 700. I mean, it's going to be a lot. And so, winning that's going to be pretty difficult for sure. As everybody also had to qualify, there's no like open whatever there. So yeah. And then also they have said this is the GP style event thing. And I think that this is relevant to our audience as well, which is that they have said that those regional championships will be somehow kind of embedded in something bigger that like DreamHack in this case is putting on. So I'm thinking, imagine the elements of a GP, right? Like command zone, stuff for sale, cards, cosplay, panels, right? Stuff like that. And side events and maybe even like biggish side events around it, because he even talked on the stream about last chance qualifiers for the regional championship being at those. So, that kind of stuff. And,
that's really important, by the way.
Go ahead.
Last chance qualifiers. I want to call that out because when talking to friends of ours who haven't really been connected to Pro Magic in a while, which is most people, right? Like, unless you're one of the last people in the dying breath of leagues here, we're getting to roll those invites even slightly further.
Yes.
Everyone's starting at ground zero and talking, to friends like, they're like, well, I like the system, but I don't want to grind PTQs, but I do want to be able to travel to like a big event and play, which is what old GPs used to be, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that I think is cool is like, hey, there's LCQs, and the prospect of an LCQ being like, oh, okay, so even if I haven't been grinding, I'm not qualified, I can go LCQ, and if I miss, I've got side events to play. Yeah, that sounds like a good enough weekend. And that I think is actually really important.
So there you go. So that's a lot to look forward to for limited fans. Limited at the highest level, which is fantastic. Limited at the local level to qualify for real tournaments that get you into the pro play system. That's awesome. So I'm really excited for that. And then some type of events that would be close enough to a GP that I would recognize that there are side events and maybe even medium-sized limited tournaments going all weekend. Super in for that. The one thing we didn't mention, Luis, and I did actually just want your take specifically on this, was, they took away the pro club. Like this, it's gone. Like any notion of being a paid professional Magic player paid by Wizards of the Coast is gone. There's no, like, you could win points and re-qualify for more tournaments, and there's prize pools that are comparable to before. So that part's still there, but like there's no platinum, there's no level 6, 7, 8. There's no longer term goal other than more qualifications for it. And I think that's what most people kind of anticipated from this, but it has now happened. Where are you at on that? Is that a bummer for you? Do you care at this point?
Well, two things. One is, if you want to leverage Pro Magic as the thing you do as your profession, this system makes it a little harder, but it doesn't make it that much harder, to be completely honest.
Oh.
Most of what I think are successful pros had to do quite a bit of supplementing of their income with content anyway. Like I always did, Kibler always did, like, look, Jerry always did. Like, look at, Paula, right? Constantly writing articles. You could still lead that lifestyle of, I'm going to try hard to play at all these tournaments. I might not play at every single one. That is one thing that's fairly different between this system and the old one, which is it's harder to find yourself in a position of like, I know I'm qualified for the next 3 Pro Tours. You can by like doing well at Worlds, which means you already had a good year. They also have like an adjusted match point thing where if you do well enough over the last 3 events, you get qualified for another event. And that's like their pseudo pro club. But the combination of doing content and playing these tournaments and winning some prizes in these tournaments, I think if that's what you wanted to do, you could take a decent shot at it. Like you take someone, who's got a decent following, and you do that, someone who's already there. If you want to start from zero and come at it from scratch, yeah, that's going to be tough. I mean, that's true of any of these things, right? Mm-hmm. You start a new podcast, you start a new Twitch stream, like you're going to face a lot of competition. And one of the cool things about this organized play program, it gives you a leg up if you do well in it, right? Like I started my content career by performing well in tournaments. Mm-hmm. That is how people got to know who I was. Mm-hmm. I was able to leverage that into a writing gig and then to, doing Channel Fireball and videos and stuff. But had I not won nationals and won a Grand Prix and won a Pro Tour to like in these first couple of years of my pro play, people wouldn't necessarily have a reason to listen to me or know who I am. And the same is true of all these endeavors, right? Like, it's hard to grind from zero to something successful without having something you're offering that other people don't have. The organized play system does offer that. People are going to care about these tournaments. I think that's a big success. So there's that. And then the second is, for me personally, I get a Hall of Fame invite. They did change those, by the way. The Hall of Fame gets to invite to one Pro Tour and its corresponding regional championship per year, per season, right?
Okay.
Which is less than the original benefit of qualified to all the Pro Tours, but a lot more than the current benefit, which is you get to play the day 2 of the Mythic Invitational qualifiers or whatever, set championship qualifiers. I personally, and I've been arguing with this on Twitter with other Hall of Famers, I actually think this is a fair benefit. Like, I think as announced, their original benefit was too generous. I like the idea behind it. I mean, it successfully pulled Finkel back in the game, right? They got a second Hall of Fame career even out of Finkel because of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Like that's incredible, right? That almost alone is worth the Hall of Fame. And, besides the fact they actually get to honor a lot of the folks who put a lot into this game. But at least on the playing card side, obviously they haven't quite gotten around to BDM yet.
Right.
and certain podcast co-hosts, I think, deserve to be there. But I think that they don't have – I don't feel that they're betraying their promise by inviting me to one Pro Tour a year. I think that they maybe overshot at the beginning. I think this is fair. If I want to play in a tournament, I get to play in a cool tournament. Pro Tour is a high level of competition. I'm skipping multiple steps, right? Not playing PTQs or regionals. And then if I do well, I can play more Pro Tours that season. And if I do poorly, well, I got to wait till next season or just get back onto the PTQ grind. And those are all viable options if you want, depending on what your goals are. And if your complaint is I don't get to play at every single tournament for the rest of my life, well, I don't know what to tell you. That's not tough luck. That's not that I don't think that's fair. So, anyways, I like the new organized play system. Obviously, we won't know till we're in it. I want people to kind of understand. Like, I can't read I read all the documents they put out. I didn't watch the stream, but I read everything they put out. I think I have an understanding of this. It's not. Ask me again in 6 months once we kind of know a little bit how it feels. Like, once I've been to a regional championship, once I've been to a Pro Tour, I intend to go to the first of both of those. And once we kind of see what the average person feels like, what does Woody feel when he engages with the system?
He's stoked, by the way.
No, I know he is.
He texted me yesterday about Pioneer.
Yeah.
He's like, can I play Pioneer on Arena? And I was like, no, but the fact that he's even asking me that is a big deal. Yeah.
I mean, think about the real losers in this whole system are all the people whose rings will never be found thanks to Woody being in a PTQ instead of out metal detecting. So
yes, that's right.
But yeah, I mean, I said this in my reaction piece, but overall, if I had to give a grade right now, it would be B+/A-, trending towards A-. But I got to see how this plays out. And I have faith in the team and Huey that if some big problem emerges, like, oh, you really like one thing, for example, doing well at a regional championship does not qualify you for the next regional championship. I kind of think it should. If you win a Pro Tour invite, maybe give you the next regional championship invite as well so that you have a chance to get back on the Pro Tour, even if you didn't do well in the corresponding Pro Tour. That doesn't seem unreasonable.
Because then otherwise you need to go back to the local level.
Right. But that's the sort of thing, if it's a big enough problem, I think that they actually have the flexibility to fix it, right? That adding stuff is very different than taking stuff away. And I don't know. We'll see how this plays out.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on the broad strokes. It hits all the notes that I want to hit, but it's really difficult to see the intricacies of a thing before it's actually been implemented. And so we'll keep an eye on it going forward. But overall, very good news for us limited fans.
Definitely.
Let's get into the question of the week, the Q&A episode here. First one comes from Atapong, who says, have you found yourselves to be good or bad at different formats? Have you noticed any patterns as to what characteristics of a format make you excel or decel?
I'm extremely good at every format.
That is actually true. I only have a few types of formats that I don't or can't or have a hard time adjusting to. Most recently, what was it? Kaldheim maybe? It took me a really long time. I remember watching you play your games. I remember feeling like my drafting was fine, but I remember watching you play a bunch of games, I believe in Kaldheim, and me just being like, yeah, man, I would have done something so wrongly different here, that like, you know what I'm like, I'm there's something I'm not getting. right? Like it's not clicking for me. Thankfully, that's pretty rare. Most of them, I kind of figure out what I'm supposed to be doing and then kind of slot in, if it's a more aggressive format, then I'll lean in that direction. The formats that I do the best in are the ones where you have to manage a bunch of your resources. Anytime that they put a bunch of mechanics in, like this is a good example. Like I've done pretty good in this format, and I think it's a lot in large part because of channel, right? Where like there's so many times when I'm doing my stream and I manage the resources for channel differently than the chat wants me to, than like the more obvious way. And I just go, look, I know when I need to go for the big thing. Like perfect example would be I was playing a game on stream and I had Greater Tanuki in hand and I didn't have anything else to do on 3, but I wasn't missing my land drops either. And I'm just like, I'm just going to keep it. Like I'm not going to do it because my opponent has played a swamp and a forest and I want to have as much firepower because that's a grindy color pair to be facing down. I want to have as much firepower as I possibly can over the course of this game, right? So I'm taking myself out of the near term of just being like, use your cards, do things, which is the default, by the way. Like limited does not allow you to often just say, I could do a thing, but I'm just going to choose not to. Like you have to have a really good reason, but I felt like it was. And I'm like, and then, 5 turns later, I'm like, here's this card that I've had in my hand, but now it's a 6/5 trampler on the battlefield and it's another thing my opponent needs to kill. That's the type of stuff I tend to do better in. It's the more punishing shorter term decisions where it's like, you kind of need to make a call on like the line you're going to take right here and right now. And there's not a lot of room for adjustment later. That's where I think I stumble because like, if I make the wrong call, then I can't readjust back out of it.
So a less glib answer, by the way, because I actually read that as different constructed formats. Because I play like at times I've played all of them. Obviously, I'm not always up to speed on every one. Yeah. When it comes to limited, though, the serious answer is if a format doesn't have enough build arounds and interesting paths to take during draft, I naturally draft less of it and I'm worse at it. I end up like I don't think I got to like expert level at AFR because it just didn't have enough stuff there to make me keep playing. Right.
So there you go. John says, "Hey Marshall, what watch will you wear?" Jeez, this is why this is why I vet these. Hey Marshall, what watch will you wear to your Hall of Fame induction ceremony? I don't know.
I knew where that was
how
going
likely it is, but as someone who's been the voice of Magic for most of my experiences with the game, that's something I'd love to see. Well, that's extremely kind of you to say, and I appreciate you saying that too, Luis. But I'm not going anywhere near that. If that happens, I'll post a picture of my watch on the before I go. How about that?
Let me just tell you here what I've told you before about this stuff. Mm-hmm. You don't campaign for yourself for Hall of Fame. It's seen in bad taste. It often backfires. Yeah. Doesn't come off well.
Not doing
That's what I'm for. That's what I'm for. I get to do the dirty work. I've done it before.
Totally. And I mean, and I hear you, like, cause I feel the same way you do about BDM, like absolute no brainer. Like even if they only let one non-player, and by the way, he has played at the PT, but obviously, didn't have the career for it, but I would think it would be him. Right. Like just the amount that guy's added to the game. I have no problem campaigning for them, but I am not touching that for myself.
Well, you don't campaign for yourself, even in places where you should, like tweeting out more of your watch videos, for example.
Yeah.
So I really certainly don't expect you to do it here, but
really bad.
Yeah. It is. Hall of Fame is its own thing. So we'll have to see how that is.
I know. I feel kind of torn because that didn't get mentioned with all the OP stuff. It's not really quite the same thing, but they did ask Huey, and he said, "I don't have anything to say about it at the moment." But he said, as a member of the Hall of Fame, he said, "The Hall of Fame is very, very important to me."
Yeah,
and he left it at that. And I'm like, okay,
Magic players, competitive Magic players, the best thing that happened to them was Huey getting this job.
So far, absolutely, yeah, it's been great. But yeah, so he really cares about that, and I do hope to see it come back. But it is a double-edged sword because Hall of Fame voting season is interesting, but a little tumultuous to say the least. Kyle says, is it possible to show with 17lands.com data the effect of LR and other content creators on the limited meta? I've noticed that green was very heavily drafted. Then I heard you and also the Lords talk about it being heavily drafted. The next 3 drafts I did, green was green and it was quite open. Is this me or is it an actual effect? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I can't with confidence tell you. It's hard to measure that stuff. I would certainly not be shocked if that these various podcasts influence it. I mean, a lot of competitive limited players listen to them, but
totally, and a lot of them are on 17 lands.
Sirkovitz would probably have some idea of how to figure this out, but
we should ask him. Oh, you know what we could do? We could coordinate with the Lords to put out misinformation and just flush it down the pipe and see if it comes out on the other end.
You mean again?
No, but we'd have to say the wrong thing too. That's the difference.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
All right. Next is Gray says, when making a close call pick between cards, do you ever factor in what you are passing and if that may lead to you being cut off later? If, for example, Pack 1 Pick 1 has 4 good black cards and 1 good green card, my instinct is to go with the green card, as passing that many black cards will likely put 1 or 2 people into that color. Am I overthinking this?
Almost assuredly, yes. But I'm not going to see, this is tough. It's kind of like hate drafting. It's a little bit more relevant than hate drafting, but in both cases, it's like, I don't want to say literally it means 0, but most people would be better served by assuming it meant 0 rather than anything else. Like if you're deciding between 2 cards that are exactly equal, right? And there's 3 red cards that are good and 1 green card that's good, and the best red card is as good as the best green card. Sure, you can take the green card. That does make sense. If the green card is even like 0.25 worse than the red card, I still just take the red card. You should just take the better card in that situation. You just don't know what other people to your left are doing. The person to your left might have opened a great green card, and now they're just going to stay in green no matter what. Like, that's just kind of how these things work some of the time. Like, if you cut off red, you'll be able to at least bully the person to your left at a red a decent amount of these times. And overall, you cost yourself more by taking worse cards when, like, pack 2 is just, it's one of the 3 packs. The other 2 packs matter so much more. What's more important is seeing what you get past and making decisions based on that.
That's right. That's the place to focus. Because, another way to look at it would be like, you're giving up something by taking the worst card straight up. You don't know what you're gaining, right? Like, there is no guarantee at all that you're going to gain anything from that. And you might just be guaranteed shipping off some value when you shouldn't be. A lot changes in the first, say, 5-6 picks of a draft as well, where people are a lot more savvy now, and that makes it less punishing to do this. There was a time when players weren't as good, right? There weren't podcasts and as many articles and stuff around about how to draft and, draft the hard way. And we talk about staying open and keeping your options open, where people would just pick their first card and there would be nothing on this planet that could keep them from playing it. It's just, I am now red. Right. And it was like, it did not matter what came down. They're just, I'm playing this card. That's what color card I picked. There's much fewer players that are of that mentality now that just will never let go of that card. So keep that in mind. Also, a good shortcut for it is you can use it as a tiebreaker. So, it's not enough of a factor to actually change a pick, but it is enough to say, if these are equal, I'll tiebreak over to the other. Peter says, is it interesting that the weakness of Gruul in Neo was hardly discussed as an issue? How do you guys feel about that? Did you ever make a truly good Gruul deck? Did it bother you that Gruul wasn't great? And if not, why was it less an issue here than other color combinations failing in other sets? On a final, probably related note, what did the set get right that you hope they continue in the future? I don't really care. Like, I don't.
The color, one color being worse than others doesn't really matter too much, like, or one color pair. Like, it's just not that relevant, There
has to be
something. Yeah, something's going to be the worst, and sometimes it's going to be, a color pair you like or what have you, and that part is totally fine. What Neo did well is I thought the gameplay was good. The gameplay was nice and complicated. There's a lot of cool decisions. I think ninjas, when done well, which they were here, I think that ninjas was a success in this set, are really fun to play with, and they have a lot of cool stuff going on. And I think that the ninjas in this set were quite good at that. So I think I think the gameplay overall was just the the part they got right the most, though there was a lot of cool draft decisions as well.
You know, I think one thing also, Peter, to note about like the fact that Gruul isn't particularly good in this set is, and the reason why nobody's really talking about that is because there's no spotlight on it. Like, what was Gruul supposed to be here? It sort of ended up being the leftovers from two other colors that go better with the other colors that you could pair with them. Where if we, you know, rewind a couple of sets and look at Gruul, you know, when it was supposed to be the Werewolves deck in the Werewolves set, and it flopped, that stands out a lot more. There's a lot of, the way I think of it is like design capital, right? Like when you make a new set, you know, you're going to come up with 2 or 3 mechanics that are going to go in the set. And one of the headliner mechanics is transforming, you know, double face cards. And the best way to show that, the way that we originally saw them, in fact, are werewolves, because they transform and after some specific action happens. It's extremely flavorful, and they clearly put a lot of emphasis on that for that set. And it completely missed. That really stands out. What was the design equity that they spent on green red here? But I don't even know. Like,
it was just one of the color pairs.
It was just the leftover color pair, basically.
And sometimes one of the color pairs misses, you know, like that is just part of what can happen. And it's fine. Like what it does, it's not the end of the world, you know?
Yeah. Dylan says, Marshall, what was the tipping point that allowed you to jump ship from your previous job to start a podcast? Oh, great question.
Really good Dylan. Question.
Yeah. So there was a couple of tipping points. So really worth noting here that I didn't leave the job to start the podcast. I started the podcast first. So I did it, and I'm not talking about for
instrumental
a short
for people thinking about
yes.
dipping their toe into Twitch streaming, podcasting, going pro at Magic, any of these things.
Yes. And this is, you know, I'll tell you my little journey there, Dylan, but if there's a takeaway, it's this. I was doing the podcast for almost 3 years before I left my job to do it. 3 years. Right? We started from zero, and after 3 years, we had built up an audience that I thought maybe I could scrape by if I did this as part of my work and then did another thing. And if I added this in, then I could sort of reconstruct the job that I had before at AT&T. That's where I worked. I worked on their website. So that's really critical. That I did this for free because I loved it for 3 years, every single week, including juggling when Ryan left to go work at Wizards, and then I got John Laux on at that point. That happened there too. So, you know, this was, you know, there was a lot of sort of establishment there. Now, the things that I faced at the time were that there was no way to monetize in that way. Like you could have an advertiser, which we did, but it was very, very, very small. It was just a little thing. And there was no Patreon yet. And so what I ended up doing was doing a Kickstarter for a year of the show, which is a very clunky, it doesn't really fit the way that this works, but it was the only thing available at the time. And nobody else in Magic had done anything like that. So it was very scary. There was a really good chance that it was going to miss. And so what I ended up doing was I wanted to leave that job anyway. I wasn't doing well there. I was just like, I'd been there for 6 years and it was pretty boring and kind of one of those, you know, kind of soul-sucking office job type situations. And so I was like, yeah, I just don't want to do this. So the things that aligned to have me leave were, one, that I really wanted to just get out of that job and do something else. 2, poker. So I had been playing, you know, call it semi-professionally for a number of years at that point. And I could then take more of my time and go play more poker during that time. And I knew what my hourly was. Like I knew the games I could play in and how well I did in them and what that could do for me. And I could just simply up the hours that I was playing in those to like help compensate for the potential. And then I also gave myself a runway. I said, you've got 6 months. You're going to quit your job. And then in 6 months, if you don't feel like there's something out ahead of you that you're kind of on track for to roughly get back to what you were making before, then you're going to have to, you know, polish off the resume and get another job like the one you had before, just at a different place. So I had saved up money and put it into this, and it costs a lot. I mean, I got sleeves made for the Kickstarter. I didn't have any income for that time outside of the poker stuff and everything. So, you know, there was a definite floating period, a lot of risk taken, I think would be a good way to put it. that this just didn't work out or whatever. And as it turned out, it did. The Kickstarter did well. And so that bought me beyond the 6 months, to kind of figure out more with how to do the podcast and how to monetize it and stuff. And then I was able to start taking steps from there to try to make it more permanent. And eventually I was able to phase out the poker aspect because I didn't hate playing, but it's a little bit of it's a very stressful job. You can lose money at it, which doesn't really translate when you're like, I put in a good 10-hour day and now I'm down $2,000 or whatever. Like that just felt wrong. And then also there's something that doesn't feel good about the same thing every day after day about taking money from other people. I don't know why. Like it didn't feel like immoral or anything, but it just doesn't. Like when we make this podcast, Luis and I talk about this off the air all the time. Like I feel good about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we get emails from people that say like that it helped them out or that they look forward to it every week. And it's just that we understand that we're not like changing the world on some massive scale, but that we are adding something that's good, right? That people enjoy and that they like. And that feels really good. Like that feels much better than like, I want a huge pot off a guy who's like half drunk or doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm just better at this than him. And so I was able to phase out poker and then, get onto this stuff. And of course, at some point their coverage started to ramp up as well. And then I was able to kind of pivot from there. But really big point, Dylan, goes back to the beginning. Test the waters first, right? Like make the thing you want to make first and see what's there. Do you get an audience? Do they like it? Is it working? Right? And then you can start to think about transitioning from your main thing. Kirsten Cameron says, hello. Over the years, we've had a few Luis-centric episodes on his life and journey into Magic. Will we ever get a Marshall one? Well, this is a very Marshall-centric episode. I'd love to know more about your story. Great content as always. Thanks for the excellent podcasts.
I was going to say not if I have anything to say about it, but your answer is better.
Yeah, so we could. I mean, you would have to do it. You would have to interview me or something, Luis, because I can't interview myself. Yeah, so if we wanted to do an episode like that, we could. I did do one like that a really long time ago with John. He bullied me into it. I didn't want to do it. I'm like, no. People want to hear about cards. Like, I don't want to do that.
That does sound like something John would do.
Yeah. And he finally was like, no, we're going to do it. And I'm like, and then he lied and then got me to do it. But he was 100% right, because that ended up being really one of the episodes that we've gotten the most feedback on over the years. Mo actually commented on it here on the Patreon. It was episode 171, which you can find on lrcast.com. Wow. It was from 2013. So it's a really long time ago, just the old 9 years ago podcast. But that one, surprisingly to me, at least at the time, really did resonate with people. I don't remember what I said in it, but you can go back and listen.
We'll have to interview about your burgeoning watch empire.
Yeah, there you go. Mo, this is the same Mo that commented above, says, hey, Marshall and Luis, maybe this is more aimed towards Luis as a digital game designer. Would you happen to have any sense for what the bots are doing in bot drafting?
I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go about that. I don't know.
Is it an algorithm?
Yeah, well, so what you end up wanting to do usually is like some way that they pick between cards in a way that you want to make them as best they can. So what you can do is like you can wait. You can start by giving, like, let's say, every card a score, so that they know that like mythics are better than not, right? Like they know, so they know what the good cards are. And then what you do is you end up, when they first pick, they could just take the best card in the pack, and then they kind of weight themselves towards that color more. And then once they get a second color at some point, if they've got enough points in those colors, they just kind of lock in and just take the best card out of those two colors. Okay. But I don't know exactly how they do it or what their goals. I mean, well, I kind of know what their goals are, but I don't know exactly how they go about doing this thing.
Yeah, it's proprietary. Chris says, I'm going to the UK Games Expo this year to demo a game that a friend and I designed before it enters production later this year. Very excited, but also nervous having to demo the game to lots of strangers as quickly as I can for 3 days straight. Any tips on teaching a new game to an audience of gamers? And Chris, with the cheeky plug here, says, we're Devilfly Games if anyone in the UK is attending and wants to come check us out.
I love it.
Yeah. We'll give Chris some points there. I feel like you've been in this position before, right? Like you've been on the ground floor of a few games now. Man, that sounds really hard to teach the same game over and over for 3 days to strangers and keep their attention and stuff. My goodness.
Yeah. I've managed to and I've been to a couple whether it's like conventions like PAX or E3 where you do this kind of stuff, and it's tricky. It's not easy to basically, because you're trying to hit various notes. You're trying to hit the note of, first of all, is this game fun? Does the person get the fun? But also, are they understanding what's going on? Is the time right? The best thing I can say is to practice your demo a lot. We did a lot of work whenever we knew we were going to go demo, because we're like, all right, we've got our iPad, we've got the tutorial set up or the game demo set up. And often it's like kind of, since it's not for a mass market, it's just for literally the people in front of you. You can kind of adjust it to that. You don't need it. You can be the handhold to some degree, right? Where you can be like, all right, you see how that happened? That's because of that. And then like, how long is it? Generally shorter, the better. Whatever time amount you're thinking, it's probably better to be shorter, because again, I don't know the exact setup that's going to happen when Chris is demoing here. I think it was Chris, but
it is Chris. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's Chris from Devilfly Games.
Devilfly Games
at the UK Games Expo.
UK Games Expo. You're probably going to have a lot of folks who want to see a lot of things. You're going to want to get a move on. Like you don't want to be
definitely
taking a bunch of time here. So really important to like be snappy, be fun, be practiced, and kind of do your best. Like those are a lot of things, but the reward is there. If you convince someone to play your game, you get a lot out of that,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like the base level I would start with, Chris, is how can I respect the person in front of me's time the absolute most? Like don't talk about yourself. Don't try to make a joke that isn't funny. Don't trim all the fat away from it.
I've been pretty successful at making jokes that aren't funny.
Yes, you have. You're the king. But a good example would be like if you make when I make YouTube videos, right? When I make the ones for the watches and stuff like that, I'm really, really picky about what I say on those that are for my benefit. Right? Calls to action or things like that. I don't say smash that like button. I keep that stuff out. And the reason is, even though it would probably benefit me to do it, is because I want to be as respectful of my audience's time. These videos I'm making are quite long, and I really want to make sure that everything in them is along the storyline of what I'm trying to tell. That's what you should be doing. Just shrunk way, way, way down. As short as you can get it reasonably. You should have good energy. Smile, be engaging, but any fluff, get that out of here, right? Just get down to brass tacks. People just aren't going to have patience for it because you're probably going to be the 20th person they see demo a game, Right. So get the basic points across as soon as you possibly can and as efficiently as possible. Ed says the sagas in Neo seem to have upped the power of this enchantment subtype, with each one being the equivalent of a suspend creature plus pre-ETB effects. There have been powerful sagas before, but are these new ones an example of power creep and fast action? Great question.
I don't know what fast action means exactly. Like, is that a term? It sounded like a term of some kind.
It's a term, yeah. It just, sagas haven't been out for that long, and now we're seeing them just turboing up.
They've been out for 7 years.
Have they really?
Something like that. Dominaria was like 2015 or 2016.
Oh, okay. Fair.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, that really
I guess it was 6 years, I think. But yeah. Wow. I think this, I don't know. I wouldn't even necessarily call this power creep. They designed a bunch of sagas. They wanted those sagas to be good, which is reasonable. And yeah, they made some powerful ones. That sagas don't intrinsically have to be powerful, but these turns out these are of course quite strong.
But these are different, right? I mean, these ones just like the fact that they become a creature at the end is a game changer for a saga.
Well, sure, but any saga could have done that, or they could have put a token into play or something. Look, they took a theme and a pattern and they applied it to all the sagas. That doesn't mean these sagas have to be better. They just ended up costing them and putting the effects on them. Like they went aggressive, and that's fine. That's something that you certainly get to do. and I think is reasonable to do.
I'm going to give you a follow-up question on Ed's behalf here then. Can they go back?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. They can go back to weaker, that don't give you a permanent at the end of the thing or whatever.
Yeah, they can easily do that.
Okay. Mark says, what do you guys think about having a non-ranked best of one human draft queue that costs fewer gems but also has lower payouts?
Oh, I know people have been asking for Phantom Draft a lot. I do like the idea. Like, I think it's cool to get people anything that gets more people drafting, I think is good. So I wouldn't hold your breath though. It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you be less excited about it if you were Wizards of the Coast?
Yeah,
is there an argument that it could make us much or more money, or is that not a thing?
There is an argument for that. I don't think Wizards is very excited about that argument.
Okay. Yeah, it's weird too, because you could make the argument that they're all Phantom. Like, you can't do anything with the cards. Play with them, right?
Yeah,
I don't
also
know.
True.
Jake says, the OP announcement seems promising. I'm more excited to play competitively than I have been in a few years. The one thing I didn't fully understand is how Arena play will integrate into the new live event system. How would you guys like to see Arena and the Resurrected Pro Tours work together? So first, Jake, they haven't said how those are going to go. So it's not that you missed it. They just haven't said yet, but they have said that it will.
I would be happy with some amount of online, but not tons. I like Arena as a vessel to qualify for the cool tournaments. I have not found any tournament to be held on Arena to be cool. Like, okay. I just don't think there's
except for the opens, right? Those are cool.
Yeah, that definitely is cool, and I could even see opens as like a vessel to get points, right? Mm-hmm. Like you play in an open, and like they have like a pro point challenge or something, and you play in an open, and you do that. That I would find to be awesome, but I wouldn't want any of the Pro Tour level events to be held on Arena because I just don't think that that's a good reward. I just don't find the online tournaments to be as captivating. And like maybe Arena's part of the levels to get up to that point, but I don't think it should be one of the like rewards for doing that, if that makes sense.
It does. Would you see, let's say I told you that there was a qualifier tournament on Arena, an open event that anybody could play in. Would you expect that would qualify you for a regional championship or for a Pro Tour?
Regional championship.
Feed the regional championship. That makes a lot of sense to me. I would love to play in those online. Ben says, genius or grifter? Feigning MTGA timeout to get down a sweeper for max effect. And he also says he loves 17 lands and wants to thank Sirkovitz.
Yeah, I don't generally find these questions to be genius or grifter exactly, because basically what it comes down to is like, if someone is using the program inputs and emotes and timing to try to trick you, I just kind of don't put much weight into that. I try not to read into it too much. Like if they're going to rope before doing something, oh, I timed out, so I didn't play anything, so you'll play into my sweeper. Like, I don't adjust the likelihood of them having a sweeper up or down for that. Like, I generally think they're a waste of time. You can do what you want to do, but
I kind of agree, Ben. I think that the best way to play is how Luis does, because the problem is that you always could layer on your own suspicions onto what's going on the other side, but you absolutely could be wrong. Somebody times out and you're like, oh, they're deep in the tank. Wow, look at that. Their internet went down for a minute, right? Their kid started crying. They decided they wanted to hit the restroom real quick. I mean, like, you don't know, right? Like, so if you're going to try to like take away strategic play from what your opponent does, or on the flip side, try to give off that impression, the best way to combat that is just to look at it like a game log, where you're just like, what did the opponent do as far as game's actions go? And that's that.
I will say that I sometimes get reads based on how my opponents play on Arena or Magic Online, and I do trust those sometimes. Mm-hmm. But that it's usually pretty easy to tell when someone's trying to like trick you. Like,
or when it's just too many out. Like if somebody times out for a while, like it could just be too many things.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much online poker you end up playing, but I know people think about this kind of stuff a lot when it comes to online poker. Some people use like a randomizer to decide how long to take on their decisions and stuff like that, just to not signal things. But ultimately, I think it kind of washes out most of the time.
Yeah, most people didn't put any actual weight in online tells, but there were people that talked about them. I played a lot of online before it got banned. I mean, I was like 24 tabling. Like, I was a machine, but then it got banned. Phil says, with OP mostly on its way back, what city are either of you most excited to go to a major tournament in? Is your choice predicated on the things you'd like to do in your time off in that particular place, or the chances of certain people being there based on geography? It's always based on food, Phil. So just
Honolulu, obviously.
It's what food we want to eat, and then we'll figure out the rest. And yes, Honolulu is that. I've been kind of wrestling with this a little bit because, you know, I'm starting to look at, okay, what are my coverage opportunities going to be, and where is this going to go, and that kind of stuff. And man, you know, I really tried to refocus back on like my life here when the pandemic hit, because it kind of pulled me out of my cycle of being gone all the time and having a lot of my social structure on the road and a lot of the people that I am, you know, really care about. And then when I was here, it was kind of like, I've kind of neglected here a little bit, you know? And so I've been trying to kind of build that back up with like playing sports with people around here. And like, I joined Seattle Watch Club and stuff like that to be a little more social, you know, see my family more often and stuff. And I've really liked that. So even though these trips aren't happening as often as they were before, so that shouldn't really interfere with it, it does have me kind of going like, oh man, getting back on an airplane, like, doesn't sound great to me, honestly. So I haven't really been thinking about it in terms of like, oh, sweet, I get to go back to this city that I really like. It's more like I'm trying to get my head around it, and then I'll remember, you know, the pizza place and the place that I like to go or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, Phil. But Honolulu is definitely the answer. Ryan says, does a draft format with a color imbalance like AFR play better or worse in sealed?
It actually plays a little worse, I think, because you just end up, I mean, Zendikar is the worst. Zendikar PTQs, original Zendikar,
they were unbelievable.
The judges had to start preparing for them by bringing 3 times as many swamps and mountains as the other colors.
It was incredible.
Opponent. I remember playing a GP and I played green white because it was kind of weird, but that's just where it ended up. I just had all my rares were in green and white. I had
Skyfishers or something. Man,
I had a bunch of Kazandu Blades Masters, a Terra Stomper, all this cool stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Day one, I played 6 rounds. 3 buys plus 6 rounds, 9 rounds. And of the 6 rounds I played, all 6 of my opponents were on black red.
That's incredible.
Just what happens.
That is what happened. Obnixilis, Soren Markov. I remember there were these runs of rares that people would get too, and they'd have the same 2 or 3 rares every single time. And it was like, yeah, you either got that pool or you got the one that Luis got. How did you do in that, Luis?
I made day 2. I went X1 on day 1, and then I did not do well on day 2.
Wow, nice work. Matthias says, have you been thinking about getting back into collecting TCG cards like Magic or Pokemon? Or sorry, I've been thinking about getting back into collecting them. Do you actively collect cards? If so, how do you go about deciding what to collect? I'll start. No, I do not actively collect. For somebody who's into multiple hobbies where collecting is a big part of the thing, I don't actually like to collect stuff. It's really weird. I only like to have stuff that I really am using. So like I like owning Magic cards if I have a deck that I can put them in and play in. Then I'm in for it. I'll get the cool stuff and I'll be happy about it. But I don't like having binders of cards just sitting there not doing anything. It doesn't do anything for me personally. So I don't really collect it all. But Luis, I know you're kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I collect Magic cards at this point. I just kind of collect the cards. It's a combination of the cards I like and cards I think I want to play with. So like I kind of slowly make sure I have a lot of the like staples for formats that I want to be able to play, in the event that I would need to. And then cool cards, if I just kind of keep an eye on it and I kind of passively look. And if something comes up that strikes my fancy, I'll go ahead and pick it up. But, for the most part, like for right now, I'm trying to fill out the cube. So I picked up some collector's edition power to upgrade our cube.
Those are so gorgeous.
Yeah, and they're nice and beat. I love beat cards. It's actually like, it's funny. Most collectors love the mintiest card. I love beat cards because I want to play with my cards. So like,
so funny.
I've got a bunch of cards here. I guess we're not on video, but like, see, Marshall, you can see this volcanic island here that's like just completely torn up. Like it's just like it's actually
beautiful patina on it. That's what we call it in watches when a watch gets like that beautiful worn state, where like it feels old and real. That's the patina on it, and you like a good patina. Oh, a Mox, nice.
Yeah, that's just got like this is. Honestly, I think this is an Alpha Mox Pearl, but there's a small chance it's a really beat beta.
Like the corners are so rounded from wear that it could be beta. That's incredible. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you're interesting too with your collection because you really just collect by your gut, right? Like you just pick up the cards that you personally like. Like you don't really follow all the trends where it's like, people really get obsessed about one card type thing. You just like pick up the cards that you like. And as it turns out, you have very, very, very good taste in Magic cards because I've seen part of your collection and it's very impressive. Daniel says, I know you're both basketball fans. So who will you be rooting for in the Final Four this weekend?
I got to admit, I would no longer consider myself a basketball fan, and I blame organized play for that.
Because we all talk about basketball the whole time, or what?
Well, Ben S was on my PT team, and we would often watch basketball games at these events when everyone else was testing, and and we would also, me and Ben would love to bet on the games,
little friendly wager.
Yeah, so. I had a period of time where I was watching quite a bit of basketball, even had League Pass and all that. Now I have not watched a basketball game since the last time my dad visited, because he's a huge Golden State Warriors fan. So him and his wife would put on the game every night when they were visiting, and I would watch it with them.
Yeah, and I'm a huge basketball fan, but I focus on the NBA, not on NCAA. So the teams, Luis, will each have to pick one. There's Villanova, Kansas on one side, and this is the big one. This is like, has potential to be one of the sickest Final Four games ever. It's UNC and Duke. That's North Carolina versus Duke. They're probably the biggest rival in all of college sports, and they've never played each other in the Final Four. And just to add a little extra, Coach K, the head coach of Duke for the past 35 years, is retiring. This is his last season. And I can even add more. They played each other in the last game at I think it's called the Cameron Center where Duke plays. So this is Coach K night, right? And they're playing against UNC, and North Carolina is quite a bit worse than Duke this year. And they upset them and beat them at home. So, which like North Carolina fans, there's just nothing better. They hate Duke and they hate Coach K. And so defeating him on his special last night is like the absolute cherry, but now they're pretty predicted to get beaten in this game. But if they can send him out of the NCAA tournament and out of his last home game, it would just be like the biggest accomplishment. So where are you at? You want to see the underdogs win? What do you want?
North Carolina, those are the Tar Heels, right?
That's that right. Like Michael Jordan went there.
I like the underdogs. I'll go with North Carolina.
All right, plus, I'm in.
Duke had that guy, Grayson Allen, right? That was that guy seemed like just kind of unbelievably obnoxious. So I'm gonna go with North Carolina then.
Yeah, Duke has a reputation for producing the players with the most punchable faces. All right, next question comes from Brandon, who says, I know during set reviews, Marshall always pinpoints a few cards each set as ones that people have to start beating him with before he'll start playing with them. Once a limited format gets, quote, solved, there are always going to be some bad cards there. There's always going to be some bad cards. There can be very good he meant to say that can be very good in certain situations or decks. How do you avoid the trap of assuming that all the bad cards should be avoided at all costs? There's a lot of equity that can be gained by knowing what a bad card is going to wheel and be excellent for your deck. Yeah, I think the way that I avoid that, Brandon, is I never think that a card should be avoided at all costs. Like there is almost always a time and a place for each card in the set. What we're really doing when we call a card bad is saying that time is either so narrow or so not often that it's not really worth considering. And Luis and I have a different role to play here, right? We want to get that point across. So that's what we try to do. But if you're going to listen to just the set review and you come away with us having said this card is bad, that's probably better for you to just never try it or never bother with it for the set than it would be to recognize the one time in the 10 drafts you do or whatever, or 20 drafts or 50 drafts, that it actually comes up that it might be okay in your deck. If you listen to the show week in and week out, you'll know the more nuanced takes that we'll have, where it's like, this is a bad card, but we did find one situation where it actually makes some sense, or where you'd actually prefer to play it. So I think avoiding that mentality is really important of acting as if there's cards that you should just literally never put in your deck. That's very, very rare.
Yeah. The way I always look at it is like, what are the costs of trying things? And if you feel like you're going to do a lot of drafts and you really want to understand the intricacies of the format and you're going to go really deep, think of like a more heavily invested, like 17 lands user who knows they're going to rack up 50 plus drafts every format, right? Then you have a lot of incentive to like try to challenge your preconceived notions, and you're like, wow, this looks bad, but I'm going to try it, or I'm going to take that rare, or what have you. If you think you're going to draft a couple times, then I think one of the things you can do to increase your win percentage, for example, you go to F&M once a week and you draft, and you're going to do that like 4 times, and then your store is going to switch back to Commander or Standard, which is something a lot of stores do, right? They run drafts for the first couple weeks and then switch back. Not Standard anymore. No one plays that. But then like maybe you listen to LR, and if we say we think a card is pretty bad, you can just kind of avoid it because you don't want to spew away one of your 4 drafts trying out new stuff. So it kind of just depends where you're at, like, and what your goals are.
Right. But yeah, that sums it up. Let's see. Princess Boggy. Okay, so Princess is asking a question about a card from New Capenna. So we'll hold off on that one because we'll definitely have time to talk about those. And we've got a preview card coming up in a couple weeks as well. Cody says, I've noticed that at higher rankings and limited on MTGA, that most players run 3 to 4 color decks, mostly just all good cards and fixing. Am I missing out on improving my limited skill sets by just sticking to core strategies and 2 colors, occasionally splashing an off-color bomb? A couple of things here, Cody. One of them I would be, most players run 3 to 4 color decks. That's probably not true necessarily. I mean, what kind of a sample size would you have to say that? I guess is like that more than half of the players are running 3 or 4 color decks. Probably not accurate, but also this deck is good. The 3 to 4 color decks are pretty good in the format, and they all are also kind of the flavor of the month or whatever. Like they're the thing that people are doing right now. So I'm not surprised that you're seeing more of that than normal. To answer your question, though, am I missing out on improving my limited skill set by sticking just to course 2 colors? Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you should be spreading your wings and flying a little bit when they give us the tools to do so. And this is one of those. So yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So there you go. Alexander says, Marshall, with the OP announcement, do you still plan to split your time between Magic and the Watch channel? Seems like a good balance, and I enjoy both of them. Actually, curious what your future goals for Wristwatch Revival are, and in general, love the show. Thanks. Yeah, I have to make a decision about that, but it looks like it won't be hard to do because right now the only events that actually have coverage are the 3 Pro Tours and the World Championship for that next season. So it's yet to be seen if the regional championships will do coverage or who's involved with that or whatever. So if I only end up doing the 4 events a year, and by the way, I don't know that I'm doing those. It's just if that happens,
just assume that you're locked in.
It would be, but we work on a per event basis. we do not get to work.
Let me just give yours a little tidbit, a little behind the scenes look. This is like something like 2015. Marshall has done 32 Pro Tours in a row, and it's like, oh, are you what are you excited to go to the next PT? He's like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to be on staff for that one.
Well, I'm not trying to put it out like I don't think it. I'm just saying, look, man, I've seen a lot of stuff change on coverage, right? And I've seen a lot of very established people on coverage not be there the next weekend. So I don't like to. What do they count your ducks in a row on the basket? Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I do think that I'll be able to balance it. The Watch channel's really taken off. And so I've been putting as much effort into it as I can. And I do need to make sure that I don't overdo it with other commitments where it's taken away, because I really do need to make sure that I'm focusing on the watch channel while it's in this like growth stage, and while I'm, it's really difficult for me to get videos out the door as often as I'd like, even with having like not as many coverage gigs. So I really do need to make sure that I focus on that and just see where it goes. Jeremy says, greetings, gentlemen. I hope your spring is going well with the PT comeback. I have to ask the hard-hitting questions. What are a couple of places you've never been that you feel would be a good host city, both in the U.S. and abroad? Also, where's a place you'd like to return to? Also, what are the odds of getting Huey to make a limited-only PT? But Jeremy also put a laughing emoji after that, so I think he knows the answer. Also, shout out to Sirkovitz. Love it when he comes on. Love you guys and appreciate all the hard work you put in. Thank you, Jeremy. So we kind of talked about where we might go back to, but is there a city that you think would be a good host city for a PT that either has never or hasn't been there for a long time?
Oh yeah, top of my list, New Orleans. They had a PT in New Orleans right before I started like actively PTQing, though I followed the coverage. And then they haven't been back since. And I don't know anything about like the difficulty of organizing events in New Orleans or Louisiana or any of these things. I just know I would love to go to New Orleans, and I've never been. And it's just like a really cool sounding place.
Yeah, that sounds really, really cool. I have never been there either. Corey says, hey guys, happy new PT announcement week. We did it. We made it. Woot. Semi-sarcastic question incoming. Genius or Grifter, MTGA puts up a confusing pro scene so that when a pro tour comes back this week, the new scene looks like a shining diamond.
All right. I would say that it would be genius, except nothing about the way that they handle the last 4 years of organized play has been genius. Absolutely nothing. No points awarded. Do not pass go.
Yeah, so we know that it
wasn't even Grifter. They only grifted themselves and everyone else. So It was just like there was no benefit to be gained. They just incinerated a bunch of goodwill and fun and equity for chasing the esports dream, which I do understand that part at least. But
same. Jason says, maybe it's just me, but do a lot of recent cards have way too much text and word things too confusingly? I'm not saying it's bad as Obelette, but most modern sets have at least one or two cards that I have to carefully read every time they show up. Sometimes it's a lot more cards. I don't have as much time for Magic as I used to have, so maybe the problem is me and not the cards. And Jason also says, side note, everyone should check out Marshall's Watch channel on YouTube. It's great. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. Man, these cards, Karsten ran the numbers, and like cards are more wordy than they ever have been. Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel that, particularly at the beginning of the format. And I do wonder if the cost, because what's the cost to that? Right? Like,
well, the cost is that it is harder. They've increased the barrier to entry for people who want to learn Magic. Because imagine your friend's like, hey, you should play this game. It's really cool. Check out some of these cards. And you're like, these are incomprehensible to me. This game's not for me. And it also can make games less fun. It's not fun to screw up how a card works or to not understand, right? And, make a mistake based on that, or just feel like I'm playing Magic the Reading instead of Magic the Gathering. That said, cards doing cool things and pressing the boundaries is part of what, is going to happen in this game. And I think that they've gone too far on the text. I 100% agree that it's just too much. It's not, it's not anyone's fault of not keeping up. It's the text. There's too much text, but I don't see that changing. So yeah, get your reading glasses on, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Matt says, hey, Marshall and Luis, do you ever listen to tunes while drafting? If so, do you have a go-to album or genre?
I listen to music while driving, not drafting, mostly, but sometimes I'll have music on. I'm like a pretty terrible music listener in the sense that like I don't really have tons of favorites as much as like I just like a lot of different music and am pretty content with almost anything that puts on. So I just like kind of have just, use like playlists that just have tons of different songs from different genres and just, kind of enjoy that. But I like who's my favorite artist or something is not, I just not a big thing for that.
Okay. Yeah. I have an interesting relationship with music when it comes to this stuff, which is that I really love music, and I do have genres and albums and stuff that I go to, but I can't do it while I'm doing anything that requires my attention. Music, it engages my whole brain, right? To be able to process like all the lyrics and the background stuff, the sound, the beat, the everything. And that's really great for me because it really like, I focus on that and I really like it, but it makes it basically impossible for me to like edit videos or focus on a draft if music's on. If anything with any type of rhythm is going, I just get super distracted. I can have movies, like I can have complicated,
but you're a slave to the beat.
I actually am. It's actually to the point. It's really funny. If I work on a watch that is loud when it ticks, like an older pocket watch, you can actually hear them like when they're sitting on the table. I can't stand it. I have to move it into like a drawer where I can't hear it because it will trigger into my brain of ticking. And I'm like kind of doing this like head nodding. And it's just a stupid watch ticking. If it's like an actual song, I can't take it at all. But when I do listen to music, I'm not like Luis in the sense that I just sort of throw on a bunch of different stuff, but I do have pretty broad taste. Like some of my favorite bands are like Tool, Decemberists, We Were Promised Jetpacks. More recently, what are they called? Fontaine's DC. I've actually went and got to see a show pre-pandemic from them. A lot of kind of drum-driven, beat-driven stuff is what I usually go for. A couple more questions. Ryan says, Marshall and Luis, how do you best evaluate combat tricks? I often find myself valuing combat tricks really low in drafting because I feel like they have a low impact on the board and can often be vulnerable to a 2-for-1. I know cheap impact full combat tricks are good, but I still undervalue them. Am I right to do so? What can I do to better evaluate them in the future? It's not a bad starting place, honestly.
Yeah, if you listen to the show, I was going to say, we also tend to like start from the position of like, yeah, most combat tricks are not that exciting and maybe some of them stand out. But, you know, we start most formats pretty low on combat tricks, just kind of for the reasons you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there also tend to be too many of them in the set, meaning that they're somewhat interchangeable and you never want, I've never ever reached the end of a draft and been like, man, if I just had 3 more combat tricks, right? Like the only time that ever happens is if you get rewarded for targeting your own creatures, which has only been in a couple of, Thero sets or whatever. But on any normal circumstance, you can always find them. So it is appropriate to value them lower and recognize what deck wants them and then how much they want them. But kind of the whole point of them is that you can pick them up when you want. So you think you're actually kind of doing it right, Ryan. Matthew says, super excited to see draft back at the PT. Also super stoked to be able to say PT again. Since you both have been on coverage, what do you think is the best way to cover the draft portion of the PT and make it exciting to watch?
I have always been of the opinion that the way to do that is to follow a person's draft and then their deck build and then watch them play 3 matches in a row.
Me too.
And they just never tried that.
No, they did. We've done that quite a bit. It's that has become the default for the past few years.
They never tried that when I was on coverage. It happened sometime after. And
I think, you're pushing, my pushing, I think that some of the powers that be also agree. And that has become a more prevalent thing. I think it's critical. I think that it's non-negotiable. Like that is the story of that draft. And then I would also add that I like the stuff that we did at the last 2 World Championships with draft, where we did deeper dives into what was going on at the table. And I think that if that stuff can be accommodated again, it does make it more accessible. Last question comes from Corey. He says, I've noticed that you guys always refer to the Scry 3 part of Imperial Oath being so impactful, but in my limited experience, Vigilance is very good in this format. Also, I think it is a big part of what makes the Invoke the Ancients as so good as well. How big of a difference is the 3/2/2s with Vigilance versus not?
It's a pretty big difference. Getting to kind of attack for free while leaving shields up is huge. And it's funny because I live in the world of digital games, right? That's what I've worked on for the past decade. And you get to change little things. Like imagine if we're in the like world where Magic's only digital and Imperial Oath is just crushing it. The format's all about it. And we're like, hey, why don't we try removing Vigilance or making it Scry 2 or something along those lines?
Yeah.
You would see how big of an impact is even like a very small change.
You can actually see it.
A seemingly small change. I mean, like when I was working on Eternal, right, which is a very similar rule set to Magic, if we made like a 2/3 into a 1/3 or a 5/5 into a 5/4 or a 5/5 into a 6/5, the stats the stats on the card of like how much it won or got played tended to change quite a bit. Like those changes are big. And I expect if you removed vigilance or made it scry 2, those changes, vigilance is the bigger change of those two, I think, but either of those changes would actually have an impact. And I bet you'd see the 17 lands rating of this card drop kind of in tandem with that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool to be able to play around with that stuff and actually see the results, but not where we live. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks everybody for submitting your questions. We really do appreciate it, and we do look forward to these shows. If you want to get access to this, if you want to get in on it, you can join the Patreon. Any level, doesn't matter what level you come in at. You can cap it monthly to whatever works for your budget, and you'll get access to the Patreon feed. And that is where we put the question thread. So you can ask questions. It's patreon.com/limited resources. The show is brought to you also by channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all your magic needs, and ftx.com outside the US, ftx.us within it for all of your digital asset needs. If you want to find anything related to the show, it's lrcast.com. You can go back and find that old episode that John did with me almost 10 years ago now, and any other episode of the podcast on LRcast. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV. That's going to do it for this one. Luis, you're going to be gone for the next 2 shows?
Next 3 shows.
The next 3 shows? I think it was 2, you said, wasn't it?
It's 1 show.
It's 1 show. Okay, great. That's even better. Oh, I really like that. That's good news. All right, so he'll be gone next week. We'll have a special guest, and then Luis will be back after that. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next time.
All right, Marshall, this is the sign-off you've been waiting for years and years.
What is that?
I've gotten a lot busier lately. I have a lot of things kind of pressed for time. And, today did seem like there's no better day than today. Okay,
I like this. I like where you're going.
To announce that I'm not actually quitting, even though, of course, April Fools. I gotta give credit to Zach Marcello for suggesting this. Actually,
that's really good.
If you were ever going to quit during the sign off, which I still will, by the way, when that time comes.
No, you won't. We've talked about it.
April Fools is the best, but I honestly, it wasn't because of you, Marshall. It was the listeners. I didn't want the listeners to start listening to the sign off and because I think some of the listeners would be unhappy if I left. So I don't want to put the that minority into a tailspin. So
hey, as long as you're here, if it's for the listeners and not me, I can live with it.
But yes, so no, I will say that April Fools might seem like the kind of holiday I enjoy, but I believe very strongly there's a right way and a wrong way to do April Fools. And as much of a troll as I am, I actually tend to dislike it. The right way is to make jokes that are funny and obviously jokes, like ridiculous ones. Like, you remember Among Us, right?
Yeah.
Among Us. Yeah. For April Fools, they turned on horse mode where all the avatars, all your characters are horses now. They have 4 legs and they run around. Like, that's funny, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
James, our content manager at CFB, wrote an article supposedly written by an AI who read 1,000 of my deck guides, is the Luis Scott-Vargas, and he wrote this Jund article in a very robotic way, and it's really funny. You should check it out. Like that kind of stuff is funny. Kind of stuff like, pretending like, oh, I got fired from my job today. Oh no, April Fools, or oh, your dog escaped. Oh no, April Fools is like, but those aren't funny. Don't do those. So
right. Good example, by the way. Good example.
Yeah, it's like practical jokes. Practical jokes can be funny when it's someone opens a thing and the snake flies out right of the can. Like that's like, haha, okay, cool. The bucket of water dropping on someone, that's not funny. Like, no. I don't want a bucket of water dropped on me. No. Hell, if you do that, I'll be really mad.
Yeah.
So like there are ways to do things and ways not to. And far be it from me to be the responsible one in some way here, but I think people are getting it. Every April Fool's is better. More funny jokes, more absurdity stuff. Like, doing absurd stuff is great. Doing, mean-spirited stuff or stuff that will cause someone distress, not so much.